What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Six Rings King Show. I'm just reading the private chat now. You guys are busting my chops. I love it. You know what? It's true. It's true. You're absolutely right, Darren. Without further ado, I think we should just bring him on already because
Yeah,
it's
let's
my
do it.
fault. It's
Let's
my
do
fault
it.
that we're late because I'm washing dishes, but that's neither here nor there. All right. Big show tonight because we're talking NIL as some of the new guidelines just came out. And who else to have than none other than a guy who is an expert on the subject. This is Darren Heitner, joins us here on the show. What's going on, Darren? How you doing?
Good evening, gentlemen. Your hands clean?
Yeah. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go.
Okay, let's do this.
Again, obviously, we all thought it was kind of going to be a slow week, and I think that this really the new guidelines that just came out a few days ago, I think really kind of put a little twist and made things a little more exciting. Obviously, a lot of talk has been going on about a lot of the different teams doing certain things when it comes to NIL deals and using it as a recruiting tactic and so on and so forth. Um, from your perspective, before we even get into the new guidelines, and I'm sure some these guys have a couple questions for you also. How has this kind of gone over as a whole for the NCAA? Obviously, some of the teams, some teams are taking advantage of it more than others. But how do you think that this has kind of gone over? Is this a good thing? Is it ruining college football or college sports as a whole? Talk to me a little bit about how your feelings are about. And I know we had you on last year when we spoke a little bit about this. Things have kind of gone just crazy. So how do you feel about what's going on with the NIL?
Yeah, it's a loaded question. I mean, if you're asking for my personal opinion, I am absolutely thrilled with what's going on because, as you all know, I've always been an advocate for athletes. I never believed that these rights should have been taken away from them, stripped away from them. Think about professional athletes. Consider any individual in the United States. If that person is marketable, he or she can make money off of his or her name, image, and likeness. So why was this taken away from athletes? But then if you ask beyond my own personal opinion, how is, let's say, the NCAA considering it? Well, the NCAA never wanted to grant these rights to athletes. It was pushed into a corner by the states, including our state of Florida, which was the first to have a July 1, 2021 effective date. Well, lo and behold, it was late in the day, almost evening, June 30, 2021, one day before we were going live, that the NCAA decided to change course and offer these rights to college athletes for the first time and offer them with a very small set of what are called guardrails. And you mentioned this week the news, I guess, that there's now guidance from the NCAA. Lo and behold, 11 months later, the NCAA provides guidance on the rules that it established 11 months ago and never has enforced. And I think the NCAA is not thrilled, those in charge, with how it's gone. I think maybe for the first 6, 7 months, they're probably copacetic. They're probably saying, all right, well, here and there, we're hearing whispers about inducements, we're hearing whispers about pay for play. And then all it took was the Athletic pushing out a story about the quarterback, the high school quarterback from California, Nico, agreeing to an $8 million deal with a collective that has a mission to support the University of Tennessee. I think that's really, if you had to put an emphasis at one point of this entire ordeal over 11 months, I think that's when things changed. And the NCAA said, we have to get a handle on this, or else we're going to be ineffective sooner than we thought we would be. And that's why you had the guidance that came out this week.
Jazz is speaking on mute for those
Of
of
course,
us.
Jazz, you're on mute.
story of my life. So I guess kind of going back into the new guidelines, right? I think it's I don't know if anybody truly understands it, like the regular fan, and what this means now. Because of course now it's obviously, hey, well, you can't, and maybe you can kind of clarify it for this. The way that I understand
Sure.
it is boosters aren't allowed to put together an NIL deal for a potential recruit or transfer player um, until he signs with that team. Whereas before it was kind of, it was backdoor dealings, I guess a lot of people is what they would call it, is, they were doing some backdoor deals. Hey, this is the deal that's in place for you once you sign. Right. And so then obviously that would happen. They would announce the deal, so on and so forth. I mean, are they really going to be able to get a grasp on it and regulate that? I mean, or is that something that now is that a product of not only Nico, but obviously you saw it a little bit with the kid coming out of Pitt, the wide receiver Jordan Addison, and you hear Miami's name getting thrown in there everywhere.
You do,
right?
So you do.
Again, is this one of those Miami effect type things where we saw in the 80s and where they made all these rules based off of the way Miami was playing, or is this just it's not only Miami, it's USC, Texas A&M, and so on and so forth, or is it really just, hey, now we're going to enforce the actual rule?
Well, why don't I briefly talk about what the actual rules are and then what the guidance adds, and then get to whether it's really all about Miami or not, and cut me off at any point in time. But really, when the NCAA put these rules in place July 1 of last year, it said, number one, there has to be quid pro quo in every deal. An athlete has to do something in exchange for the money provided. Number two, there can't be any improper inducement for an athlete to enroll at a university. And three, there can't be pay for play. Basically, athletes can't receive the compensation contingent on them performing in a certain way, maybe getting a certain number of reception yards or touchdowns, etc. And that they can't have the money taken away from them if they're injured or are off the team. What the guidance actually provided was a clarification on mainly the inducement portion, saying, look, we've had these rules in place from July 1 that says boosters can enter into NIL deals with athletes. They just can't be inducements for the athletes to enroll. And then it goes a step further and talks about these collectives that have been created since July 1 and clarifies all that a collective is a group of boosters. So if a collective is doing the same thing, that's also a violation. And who can potentially be hurt by that? Well, the NCAA is most likely not going to go after the individual athletes, but it may go after the boosters and collectives, causing them to disassociate with the universities, which would be bad for the universities because these are heavy hitters, deep pockets, and they would not be able to benefit those specific athletes and even benefit the athletic departments as they've traditionally done. And then it could also hurt the schools. I mean, we could see penalties like the NCAA has put in place before, like reduction of scholarships, which tend to be the lifeblood for these programs. Interestingly, from this guidance, the NCAA said, we're probably going to turn our head towards any issues that may have arisen prior to May 9, when this guidance came out, unless it's such an egregious and severe violation. And so to your question, is this a Miami rule? Is this Miami guidance? The answer is no. I think it's Tennessee guidance, Texas A&M guidance, Texas guidance, USC guidance, every school guidance. But will the NCAA now, is it now required to make a statement? And I think the answer is probably yes. You don't come out with this guidance and say we're going to take some sort of action on enforcement unless you really plan on it. And I think the NCAA probably has thought this through already and probably has maybe a booster or a few boosters in mind, maybe a collective or a couple of collectives in mind as to who they want to take action against and make a statement on. And so I do suspect something will be coming, maybe not in the immediate future, but at some point in time this year.
Gotcha. Here's Vish, DJ, you guys got any questions?
Yeah, I got a question or one kind of one and a half. So first question is, so is there anything, I know you can't technically induce them to play for a certain school. Is there anything to prevent them from, these are supposed to be marketing deals primarily, right? Name, image, and likeness. Is there anything to prevent a booster or collective or anything from saying, okay, part of this money we're giving you is you make the X number of public appearances at these locations, which
no, it's perfectly fine.
So isn't that a way to just, like, if you make it in Gainesville, Florida, like the kid's kind of tied to that school, right? Is he going to fly to Gainesville 5 times a year after he's transferred to like make an appearance? And
well, that's the issue, right? And that gets to also part of the guidance, which is the NCAA really doesn't want collectives and boosters to enter into these types of arrangements with players until they're enrolled. And so that goes for prospective college athletes, athletes that are in high school, as well as athletes who are already enrolled at another university and are either in the transfer portal or considering it. You can write in a contract, this is not an inducement, but for all intents and purposes, it is. Like in that Nico situation, which I'm being purely speculative here. I don't know this to be true, but I think the NCAA is probably looking at that specific situation. And there, the lawyer for the athlete put in to the contract, this is not an inducement. But what if, as you said, every single deliverable has to happen in Knoxville, Tennessee? I mean, if the player goes to Oregon, obviously he can't fulfill those deliverables. So I'm not quite sure it's going to pass the smell test in those circumstances. Then again, if the athlete's already enrolled and you have those deliverables put in place, I think the NCAA would have a tougher time enforcing its rule in that type of situation.
So I guess the follow-up, the half question is, how would they enforce any of this? None of it's illegal.
Yeah.
Where's their power coming from? I know that in the past they've, stripped scholarships away for stuff that if you're not a student athlete is just part of how our society functions. But like how now that NIL has been codified and legalized on the state level, how do they even come in and penalize? Won't they just get sued?
Well, so two separate questions. Where does their power come from? It actually comes from the University of Miami, from FIU, UF, FSU, every single school that voluntarily decides to be a member of the NCAA. I mean, all it would take would be these schools, the conferences, to say, we're no longer willing to be a part of the NCAA, and there goes the NCAA's power. And that's why you've seen punishments handed out for decades by the NCAA against schools outside of NIL. But to your second question, relating somewhat to the fact that so many states have passed laws on this subject, I mean, won't there be litigation? And the answer, in my estimation, is absolutely. And you've heard from one of your most prominent boosters, John Ruiz, who's been very vocal on this subject. And he said, and he's basically put a target on his back. He said, come after me, NCAA, because what if and once you do, you're going to be sued to oblivion. Now, I think there, in all likelihood, someone like John Ruiz, if let's say he gets punished and he sues, or any other booster or collective, probably will have a strong case in court. The problem is these cases tend to take a long time to play out. And what happens in the meantime? Could a University of Miami suffer consequences for years before something like that plays out? And that's the concern. That's my biggest concern in all of this, that you may find individuals in certain schools penalized and punished while ultimately they win the war, but for the time being, they're losing some battles.
So, sorry, no, I don't know if Jazz or DJ's questions, but so in the past, this really hasn't, like, the penalties have never really gone to court before. Because like you said, the schools are kind of part of this whole, frankly, screwed up system that exploits the athletes. But if it was to go to court, would they not have the ability to, like, get a stay from a friendly judge that says you cannot enforce these penalties? Like it's lasting damage, like something like stripping scholarships for 3 years while we fight it out in court is, I think it'd probably prove out that that's going to do harm. And I think you could also probably prove out a likelihood to win the case eventually. Do you think? Do you think they would have? Because I think it's kind of weird that I guess because the school is part of the system, it's never really been taken to court in terms of penalties on these types of things. It's always been fought out through the NCAA process.
Yeah, the schools don't take the NCAA to court, but the NCAA has been sued countless times in the past. The vast majority of those times, the parties settle out of court. Obviously, the major one that went the distance and lasted many years before it went the distance all the way to the Supreme Court is the Alston case that was decided last summer, where the NCAA suffered a 9-0 decision at the Supreme Court level, and that was related to a restriction, not NIL related, but academic and educational related benefits. So, there are examples of the NCAA being sued and even losing at the highest level. But to your second point or question, could there be what you call a stay of any sort of punishment while a case plays out? And yeah, the answer is possibly more likely through a motion for preliminary injunction, where if the court believes that there's a strong likelihood for the plaintiff to succeed on the merits of the case, and that it's in the public's benefit, public's best interests, and importantly, that it's a harm that cannot be corrected through some sort of monetary relief, through money, then there is the possibility of injunctive relief. And so that will be absolutely interesting if, let's say, the NCAA chose to take action against the University of Miami and strip Miami of many scholarships. And it was due to a specific booster or collective's involvement. Could there be a case brought to court and a friendly judge deciding that there should be an injunction? The answer is yes. And there is the possibility that the Miami does not suffer the consequences while the case plays out. That would be very interesting.
Very cool. Thanks for that, Darren. Before we let you go, I actually had one more thing, a little bit of a question. The first question I have is the NIL was made not only to provide, well, correct me if I'm wrong, not only to provide the players with an opportunity to take advantage of, making something off of their name, image, and likeness, but in essence would even out the playing field a little bit in college football. Or maybe that's what it was supposed to do. We're still seeing that, I think it was like 7 to 10% of universities or the college programs are actually profiting or taking advantage of it to a specific, certain level, whereas the other schools are still kind of struggling with this. And maybe this is why some of these guidelines are starting to be, enforced per se. I guess the question is that the case? Was it supposed to level out the playing field when it came to, I guess parity throughout the college football landscape, as opposed to just having the top 4 or 5 teams? Because we're still seeing, it may be a couple of different teams, but we're still seeing those top 4, 5, 6 teams that are really taking advantage of this, not only in football, but in other sports as well. How can this start to level out the playing field a little bit better, or will it ever get to that, or is it just kind of, hey, the strongest are going to survive again, the team with the most money, well, not the team, again, let me rephrase that, the teams that have boosters or strong enough alumni or marketing campaigns are going to be able to make the most money and be successful again. And then we're going to have that issue where it's just going to be top, 5, 10 teams that are going to be able to compete every year. We're not going to see this level playing field.
Well, it was not at all the basis for states passing laws in order to ensure that college athletes would have these rights. I mean, at its core, it was believed to be an individual right that should have never been taken away from an athlete. And that was the basis by which you found bipartisan support, Democrats and Republicans coming together across the country to pass those laws. But it's an interesting question with regard to parity and competitive balance, because if we look only a year backwards or before that, arguably there was a lack of competitive balance, and there has been for a very long time. And if in fact there is a lawsuit, or there are lawsuits on the subject of the NCAA's restrictions, it becomes an antitrust issue. The only way that the NCAA would be able to prevail and say that it's a reasonable restriction is if it can cite to pro-competitive benefits, essentially saying that the restrictions are needed in order to create more competition between the schools, and that otherwise it would kill college sports. I would argue in the opposite, that there was not competitive balance. I think, if anything, I mean, again, not to attack University of Miami, but look how much Miami has benefited in the past 11 months. I think Miami's on the up and up. And that wasn't true a year, 2 years ago. I think a school like Miami, and I can cite to many other examples where maybe there is actually this ancillary benefit of competitive balance that was not a justification for adding these rights. But without NIL, I think we would have seen more and more of the same. Alabama, Georgia, the same schools at the top every year. And maybe it does level the playing field to an extent. I mean, you'll still have the haves and have-nots. Absolutely. It's going to be very, very difficult for Providence to compete against a juggernaut, or especially when you get to D2 schools. But I'm an optimist. I think that actually NIL has this benefit that wasn't necessarily a cause for putting it into place, which is that it will add a bit more parity on a year-to-year basis.
Yep, I absolutely agree. Any final questions for Darren? But before we get him out of here, I know it's late, so we do appreciate you coming on with us, Darren.
The Panthers are getting crushed now, by the way.
Great. Or maybe you need to start watching it. Yeah, we'll get some we'll get some better luck. Vish, you got anything there?
No, I'm good.
Good, you're good.
Yeah.
Darren, we'll let you go, man. We truly appreciate it once again, you joining us on the show, and of course, always welcome to come on. And we don't always have to talk NIL, man. We can talk anything else you want, brother. We do appreciate you coming on, though.
I'm not an expert at cleaning dishes, but I can give it a shot next time if you want me to.
Yeah, clearly I'm not either.
That did take quite a while, Jess.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Anytime.
Thanks, Darren. Take care.
Thanks a lot.
Cool, man. He is obviously an expert on that, so it's interesting to hear. So are they really getting crushed that bad? Is it really that bad?
It was 1-0 when our show started. So what exactly do we do here?
I don't know, man. That's
3-1 now. So
3-1. Jesus,
it's not. This is still in the same period, right? It's not that bad.
Yeah, it is the Panthers. So, anyways, I think is Max on? Is Max on?
Max is waiting backstage, man.
Mad Max, bring him on. Let's do it.
That was perfect timing. The second I texted you, it worked out.
Yeah, I literally just saw it too, so that's cool.
I do want to go through some of these comments. I didn't want to put them up while we were interviewing.
What is Gary?
We got our normal crew here. Max was actually in the comments. Now he's on the show. That's how long it took us to get to these.
But real quick before we get into some transfer portal stuff and some other news, Max, what'd you think about what Darren was saying? If you heard any of it regarding the NIL stuff, like how do you feel about the new guidelines?
I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think the new guidelines are new. I think they're just trying to kind of make it seem like they're going to actually do something. It's kind of more like a scare tactic to me. I thought it was interesting, Vish, that you asked him about, is there a way for legislation or whatnot to pause all penalties until the case is over with? Because I've thought about that a ton, and the fact that, like, if you lose scholarships or you can't recruit a player, you can never get that back. Like, there's no monetary value that the government can force the NCAA to give a school that's going to fix that. So I agree. I think it has to be paused until there's a ruling, because if not, it would just be completely unfair to me. I thought that was probably one of the more interesting pieces of the interview for sure.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense.
Yeah, because when I said they hadn't gotten to court, I meant like the schools have never challenged the punishments in court. It's always been the NCAA process.
Right.
So, like, if you go to court, all you do is get a friendly, it's Miami, slip the judge $100 and they'll fucking issue the injunction. Like, I mean, it's just like, you just get a friendly judge to do it. Like, it's not hard.
Yeah, it's
because you can easily prove lasting damages. Because once the scholarship was gone, them saying 3 years later, my bad, does not help. You're screwed, right? So, I mean, it's pretty easy to prove some of that stuff, at least.
Here's an interesting argument that somebody that we know, Max, made. And this is based off of that last kind of, question that I asked Aaron was, as far as parity is concerned, as far as, if the same teams are still going to be, at the top, if there's going to be a level playing field, so on and so forth. And some people, some tend to think that maybe this is not really going to, it wouldn't affect Miami, let's say, as much if we didn't have the NIL around, or if it wasn't as prevalent as it is because of our coaching staff, right? And obviously, you obviously know where I'm going with this. It was a great discussion that we had, and we definitely should get that roundtable going. But how do you feel about that? Like, I still think that they would be able to recruit great, right? They obviously have this amazing staff, but for me, it's like, let's not kid ourselves. That money, helps, and it'll help USC, and it helps Texas A&M, and it helps Bama and the rest. So, I mean, how do you feel about that perspective?
Honestly, I had this conversation with someone in that chat, like, personally, I feel like everyone thinks that like Miami's recruiting at this high level because of NIL. I think we'd recruit at even a higher level without it. If no schools could send money through back channels like Alabama and Georgia's and those schools have been doing it for all this time, I feel like we'd stand a chance against anybody. I agree that NIL is helping us, but I think without NIL completely, it's not hurting us at all.
Do you think the NIL makes us? And I use this term. I don't mean it like to that extent, but does it make us complacent in recruiting?
No, not at all. Because you
Okay.
still have to win the battle. You have schools like Tennessee that are offering more money than every school in the country, basically. But they need to. I mean, you saw it with the $8 million with Nico, right? So you're seeing it there. There's some kids that aren't falling for that. There's somebody in the portal that's not going to fall for that, even though their fans think
Right.
he's in the bag because they are offering more money than any other school. But you still need to have some sort of a product, some sort of a measuring stick, whether it being a coaching staff that's proven it elsewhere, or just actual on the field results. And unfortunately for Tennessee, they haven't done that yet. So I think money's only going to take them so far. At some point, they have to win on the field.
Yeah,
The thing I would say about that, though, is I think the reason it helps us is we weren't certainly not I'm not going to say we weren't doing it, but we certainly weren't as egregious in paying under the table. And the fact that we can just do this out in the open now, and it's leveled the playing field for schools that weren't egregiously doing $100 handshakes like half the SEC or maybe all of it is doing, right? That's why they're the ones screaming bloody murder, because they're also playing the NIL game, but they lost their competitive advantage, which is they were cheating.
Not only that, though.
so
Clemson,
I mean,
I think
Clemson
was one of the only schools in the ACC. Shock right there, right?
Yeah, and the reason this is scary to them is all things being equal, kids are going to want to be in Miami and Los Angeles. They're not going to want to be in Oxford, Mississippi. They were going there because that was the school paying them. So to Max's point, it's not that we have to pay more; it's that we're in the game now.
Yeah.
And then if you're in the game, you're comparing Mario Cristobal in Miami against these other schools. All of a sudden, kids want to go to Miami again. That's what they're worried about. They had a competitive advantage because they were cheating. Right. And they knew the NCAA was never going to like clamp down on Alabama and LSU and all of them for paying kids.
Yeah, so two things to that though, Vish. One, it's just funny that Tennessee gets a slap on the wrist for literally handing out bags, McDonald's bags with money in them, and now they can just like do it freely. It's just funny because they really didn't get in much trouble for doing that, and that was completely against the rules, and they should have gotten more than what they got. But the second part of it is, I think, the part that Jazz and I had a conversation about in a chat the other day is what a lot of people aren't realizing about this NIL. It's not so much that the other schools are afraid that they're going to not get recruits because now there's open competition. It's the fact that those schools are no longer getting the money from the boosters because that money's now going to NIL. So it's affecting the actual universities. Instead of Tennessee giving $8 million to the school to help build a new gym, that $8 million is going to a kid that hasn't played a down of football yet. And that's hurting the school. So that's something that nobody's really talking about in the NIL space. And I think that's why a lot of the schools are upset about it.
That's a great point. And there's a lot more money floating around in cities. So, I don't think Texas is really worried. They'll have a bazillion boosters lined up to give them money and do the NIL. It's the more college town ones without there's not that much money in Tennessee, the state. There's a limited pot there, and if it goes to players instead of school, like you said, there's not money. There's not money to replenish that. Whereas, obviously Miami, there's a lot of money in the town. Los Angeles, USC will be fine. So it is those schools that are in rural states. Some of these states don't have cities in them. There's not that many people in the state itself.
Well, just look at Florida State for an example, right? They're putting all this money into trying to get Amarius Mims, and they can't even afford urinals at their school. So instead of the money from the boosters going to actually help out the school, it's now going to one player that they didn't even get. And if he actually signed that deal, even though he's not there, they still have to pay that contract. Because as Darren stated, it's not tied to a school. If he signed an NIL deal with that collective, they still have to pay him. and he's not even attending the school.
And that's
So,
why I said they got to put in work location,
Yeah.
make this many appearances, because there's supposed to be marketing deals anyway. So if it's perfectly, like if you do a deal with the car dealership, you show up at the dealership and shoot a commercial, right?
Well,
you do that day.
That's the question mark that a lot of people have, and this is the thing that Ruiz is saying. That's the question mark about collectives. Is it's not, if you go to Florida State's collectives website, it doesn't say anything about any sort of business. So what are the players supposed to be promoting? There's no business. So with Ruiz, it's an actual business. You see the business, you see them in commercials, you see them doing stuff. None of these other schools are really doing that. So I think that's why Ruiz isn't a fan of the collectives. He doesn't think it's actual like legal in the NIL space, because there's no, these guys that are putting money into the collectives may have businesses, but that's not the business. So you can't get money from basically a crowd funded space that doesn't have a business to promote. That's not what NIL is.
Yeah, but that's why it blew up in their face, because there wasn't a business. Like Ruiz makes them go into his office all the time. So if they transfer from Miami, okay, sure, the deal's still in touch. You still have to show up at his office every Friday.
Exactly.
So you can do that from Oregon if you transfer there, right? That's not going to happen. So, and I think the reason he gets upset, I think more so than necessarily being against the collectives, he gets upset being lumped into the collectives, because for all his bravado, he's actually using NIL for what it was designed for.
He's doing it the right way, exactly.
Which is, these people are celebrities. They've been made celebrities without getting paid for their labor. They should be able to profit off of that. And as celebrities, they're pitchmen. And Life Wallet, everyone knows what that is now because of these NIL deals. This is actually how, if you're doing it correctly,
it works. I think
everyone knew it was going to turn into pay people to come to schools, right? Everyone knew that was coming. Right. The reason the NCAA went along with this, one, they had to, state governments, two, the alternative is they pay the players. Do that crap. So like, sure, yeah, you guys, as long as we don't have to, we're not on the hook for the check, go ahead. But he's actually, ironically, with all like the negative press around him, he's actually doing it the way it was supposed to be done, which is, I have a business. It's new. No one knows what it is. I'm going to pay these players, and by handing these checks out, it's going to get me notoriety for my business. And that's exactly what happened. Mm-hmm. So it'd be hard. Like, if they wanted to go after him of all people, it's going to be very hard to prove that he did not do the NIL stuff correctly, when everyone and their mother knows what Life Wallet is now.
All right. Enough of NIL. All right. Let's switch it over. This kind of has to do with the NIL under back channel NIL. No, I'm just kidding. Let's talk about a couple of players that or a couple of options that the Canes have been kind of taking a look at. If we can't name players, that's fine. We can kind of go positions, but we are going to name the first player, which I think everybody is kind of taking a look at to see what he's going to do. Obviously, I guess the name that everybody knows is Jalen Robinson, who's the wide receiver that is in the transfer portal now. Max, talk to me a little bit about Jalen Robinson's, I guess, recruiting now. He's been kind of, they've been talking about Ole Miss. They've been talking about even Oklahoma, Miami, a couple other schools. What's going on with him? He's apparently on campus now, or he's going to be here tomorrow, something along those lines. Talk to me about how his recruitment is going, and what's the shot like for Miami to get this kid? And if they even want him, right? Like if he's like a top priority, I guess is the better way of saying it.
Yeah, so there's a lot of rumors about guys that we were targeting, or not we were targeting, but a lot of rumors about guys like Jordan Addison, like some of the other guys that got named that they were trying to get poached from schools. That everybody was like, it's USC and Miami doing all this tampering, all that kind of stuff. Right. Flash is his nickname. He was like way higher on our boards than a lot of people thought, as far as guys that we would want if they became available, or if they're in the portal. So I think it kind of fell into our laps. Everybody publicly is saying it's like a Tennessee Ole Miss battle, and I don't even think either of those two schools are really in the race. Wow. Those are the schools that are very open about just throwing money at people. But again, they have to prove it on the field. And we do too, right? But he's from Central Florida. He's transferring from UCF. He wants to stay in the state of Florida. There's a lot of ties at Oklahoma. His quarterback from UCF is now at Oklahoma. Um, he has a relationship with Lebby. He didn't play under Lebby, I don't think, at UCF, but they have a relationship. Um, so it makes a ton of sense for him to go there. He already was there. A lot of people don't know that he actually started his career at Oklahoma and transferred over to UCF. So I think we stand really, really, really. I mean, we're in there. He announced that he was going to commit, I believe, on the 18th, and then moved it up to now the 15th. So he's going to be here today. He's going to be here tomorrow. Well, he's already there. And then probably goes home for the weekend, discusses it with his family, and makes a decision. But to me, I see it as a Miami Oklahoma battle, and I think we're in the lead right now with him.
That's interesting. Is he the one that mentioned that we were going to be his last visit?
Correct.
He is, right. Okay. And I guess before we let you go, because I know you got a couple other things going on, um, just a couple other names or a couple other positions that we should keep our eye on. Moving, down the road with a couple of guys that maybe enter the transfer portal that aren't big time names, or even some guys that maybe are going to still apply for the waiver for the transfer portal. Anybody that we should maybe keep an eye on?
Yeah, so as far as like positions, they're still looking at offensive linemen. They're still looking at linebackers. They're looking at anybody that's going to improve the roster. So I wouldn't be surprised if we even added another defensive lineman. I wouldn't be surprised if we added if we do get Flash, another wide receiver. They're not satisfied until they feel like they're at the best that they can. Like they're just going to continue to bring talent if they can. Um, it is going to be interesting with the graduate stuff because everybody thought that, oh, your grad transfer, you can transfer whenever. You still have to apply for a waiver. So it'll be interesting. There is one name, I guess, that's public. So obviously you can mention it. And there is interest there. And that's Demetri Emmanuel, offensive lineman at Charlotte. He started 24 straight games for them at left tackle, right tackle, and left guard. So he's a guy that's played all five positions, not necessarily at Charlotte, but in the past he's played center, he's played right guard as well. Unfortunately, he's a little bit on the shorter side. He's about 6'2", which isn't great for tackle. But you have flexibility with, hypothetically speaking, he transfers in. You could have him and Jonathan Dennis fighting for left guard, and you could flex Jalen Rivers out to right tackle because Rivers has that prototypical tackle size, and we've seen him play tackle in high school. We've seen him play tackle in the spring game. So that's an option. I wouldn't be surprised if we do get the Charlotte guy and we still aren't done at offensive line. I think it's not a, I guess, crazy to think that Mario and Mirabal want to shore up that offensive line first, or both lines. I mean, you see what we did with the D line in the portal so far. So I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to add more pieces to the O line and the D line, just because the game starts and ends in the trenches. But that's another name definitely to pay attention to. I'm not sure if he has a visit scheduled yet, but I like him. I think he'd be a solid depth piece at worst with the upside to start. The funny thing is, and I talked about it last night on our show, is that his offensive line coach at Charlotte's now the offensive coordinator at Florida State. So there's obvious ties there. They're swinging for him because they couldn't get
Thanks.
Amarius Mims from Georgia. So I said it last night on the show. Like it would be hilarious if we beat Florida State out for a kid that literally played for their offensive coordinator for years. Um, that would just be a hilarious slap in the face to them. To get continuously getting stuffed in a locker by Mario. So
The hits just keep on coming for them over there. But anyways, Max, I know you got to get going, man. Plug your show, plug your social media, man.
yeah, you can see the social media next to me, Miami Flow Max. I go live every Tuesday nights at 6:30 my time, so 9:30 your guys' time, Eastern. Max Out Show with A Black. We've got some cool guests that stop by every week. Last night we had Roman from the Orange Bowl Boys on, which was fun. Got to talk quarterback with them, and yeah, check us out.
Sounds good, man. Max, always a pleasure, my brother. You know your family. Thanks for
Of
coming on.
course. Yeah, appreciate it. You
Yeah,
guys take
thanks,
care.
man.
Got it. By the way, the Panthers tied it up, baby, 3-3.
What a comeback.
I know. That's awesome. Cliff. That's Dr. Cliff right there, baby. What's up, Cliff? Barry University for life. Yeah, I just went full gangster there. Barry University for life. For life. Anyways, let's talk really quick. Let's get out of here. But right before we get out of here, I know, Vish, you wanted to kind of talk a little bit about this
Yeah, in case
new
people
restructuring of the ACC.
Yeah, it looks like the ACC is changing the way they do business. So the NCAA is basically going to pass a law that or rescind the restriction right now requires you to have divisions if you have a certain number of teams. So they're going to get rid of that, and the ACC is going to probably get rid of divisions. So there's 14 teams in the ACC. So what they're planning on doing is you have 3 teams you play every year.
They're like your rivals, right?
Your rival teams. And then you have 5 that rotate. So you play 5 for 2 consecutive years. So 1 at home, 1 on the road.
Hold on, time out.
We
We got to answer Andres's question there really quick. This is how you'll know how the F1 race experience was. In about 15 minutes, we start our F1 show called Hitting the Apex. Andres, make sure you're on there. Same on the 5 Reasons Sports YouTube channel. It's called Hitting the Apex. Make sure you check it out if you haven't already. It starts at 9:30, and you'll get a breakdown of everything that me and Vish experienced at the race, and of course the race recap. So make sure you check it out. I'm sorry, Vish, but I had to plug that now. Go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. Definitely plug the other show. We might get 3 viewers. All right, so just kidding. We get more than that.
We get more. We might,
but not as big as the Canes should. Well, because the Canes are king. But yeah. So what they're gonna do, and this is what I wanted to get your guys' opinion on, is you're gonna have 3 teams you play every year, and then 5 that you play in a 2-year chunk, and then you play the other 5, and so on. So obviously, Florida State will be one of our 3. Curious who you guys would want out of the other ACC teams for the other 2.
Oh, Danny, you can start. I mean, I know who I want, but you can start.
I'm going to have to go with Carolina and Clemson, North Carolina.
Interesting.
Oh, you want to tell us why? That definitely went off the board for me.
North Carolina, I feel like we've had good matchups with them over the years. Now, granted, I know they didn't necessarily go our way over the past couple of years, but UNC, they're a program that has been on the upswing in recent years. They've produced a ton of talent that's gone to the NFL. I know it's not really relevant in terms of a Miami game, but they're fun to watch. And Clemson, they'll always kind of have a bit of star power as long as Dabo's there. And I think it would just make for a couple of fun games. Death Valley or whatever they call Clemson. I think it's Death Valley.
Yeah.
I know. Okay. So I think, that would make for a really fun backdrop for, playing the 3 games in terms of the 3 solid opponents, so to speak.
I'm gonna go with Boston College and Duke. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, obviously FSU's one. That's a given. That's never going to change. Virginia Tech is actually one of our rivals as well, so I think that Virginia Tech needs to be there. And to be quite honest with you, the last one to me was a little bit of a toss-up between UNC and Clemson. Here's the way I see it, right? Like the SEC, the top teams are constantly playing each other and battling it out, right? So you've got, Alabama's always playing Auburn and LSU, and let's say, even though they're not playing Florida this year, Florida, let's just say, right? Like, and you've got all these teams that are so good playing each other all the time. If we want to be able to be in that upper echelon and say that we are, we're playing top tier programs, Virginia Tech's always going to be a solid team, but they're naturally, they've been our rival for quite a while since the time in the Big East. So I still think that they should be in it. The question is it UNC or is it Clemson? Right now, I'm going to go with Clemson just because of how, they've kind of put themselves in the circle, I guess you can say, or in the ring as, one of the top teams in the country. Even on a down season, they went, 10-3 last year or something like that. So I still think that it would be Clemson. So for me, it would be FSU, Virginia Tech, and Clemson.
Yeah, I think it's definitely for me. It's definitely FSU and Virginia Tech. Those are kind of rivalries we've had for decades. I will say I would be very surprised if UNC is even in play because I feel like those Carolina schools. There's 4 of them.
True.
They're going to round robin each other and get the other 3 essentially. I think that's why they picked that number, to be honest, because they run the conference. Because there was any which way they could have done this. Oh, well, let's have 3 natural rounds. Oh, all the Carolina schools can play each other. So I have a feeling that's going to happen for sure.
True.
So I don't know how the rest of it's going to shake out, but I'd be pretty surprised if they're not like just going to stay in that state for their three rivalry games. So I'm of 2 minds on this. I think Clemson would be the best opponent to play.
Right.
I think Boston College has probably the most history behind it. We've had a lot of like famous games with them.
True.
I also like playing teams in cities, so Georgia Tech's not out for me either, just because it's easy to get to if we want to actually go watch the team play.
Yeah. Hey.
Quick flight over to Atlanta or quick flight over to Boston.
Are you saying Clemson, South Carolina is not easy? No, I'm just kidding.
I think you fly into Greenville or something. I don't know.
And by the way, flying into Blacksburg, I don't think that's not easy either.
No, Blacksburg's a pain in the ass to get to.
It really
is.
It's
not near anything. It's probably
you got to fly to Roanoke, right? You got to fly to Roanoke.
Yeah, no, it's worse than Clemson. But for me, the history of that series overrides it.
100%.
So if I'm picking one, I'll go BC.
Well, who the hell wants to go to Tallahassee either? But anyways,
yeah, but I'll go BC for the third one.
I like that. I like BC, like you said, the history there. Obviously, the biggest one, the one that comes to mind the most, right, is the 17-9 game, the Ed Reed, Matt Walters game. So it's just fun to watch. It's fun to watch those games.
I was thinking the Doug Flutie Hail Mary game on.
We don't acknowledge that game. We do not acknowledge that game. That never happens.
Up here we do.
Well, you got to hang on to something up there.
We got pro sports. We don't need college sports.
Andres brings up a good point. Syracuse is kind of an interesting one too. I feel like that's a team that we should definitely have in there. Playing regularly. But again,
well, I guess the cool thing with this new structure is you do play every team.
Sure.
Every like basically like what they were saying is one of the things is if you stay at a school for 4 years, then you'll actually play every team in the conference, home and away. So,
Danny, just for that New England comment, Gary doesn't want you on the show anymore.
Look, man, Gary, I don't know where else you're going to tune in for your Canes and then also like get information on what's going on in Nebraska. Like, I don't know what exactly you're expecting, but DJ has the rest of the globe covered. Jazz
don't tell Fish that you want a bright orange shirt because that'll get you burnt orange and also a shitty mystery pack.
Look, man, I was not responsible for the mystery pack. I ordered the mystery pack, but women's small was not on my card there.
Hey, Vish, let's do a quick shout out to our sponsor, and we'll get on out of here, man.
All right, let's do this.
Let's do it. Our official sponsor is Prize Picks, baby, the official daily fantasy app of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Make sure you're using the code 5, so FIVE. And Prize Picks will match your initial deposit up to $100. So pretty cool. The good thing is you don't have to use it all at once. Make sure you use that code 5 to log in to sign up. It's FIVE. You can play the NHL. You can play the NFL when it's around. You can play the NBA playoffs. You can do so many things. You can mix and match your players from different teams and different sports. Here's the thing, right? It's all going to depend on how much you want to win. Is how many players you choose. You can pick between 2 to 5 players. Play the over under on individual categories and win as much money as you can. It's basically it, man. If you pick 2 players, you win a little less. If you pick 5, and so on and so forth. It all depends, again, how much you want to win. Go to prizepicks.com and sign up today using the code 5, FIVE, prizepicks.com. Hey, thank you to Darren Heitner for coming on the show tonight. And always our good friend Max as well. Really cool show. Got a lot of information on the NIL. But as Fernando Tapia, my good friend, says, it's time, baby. It's time. Thank you guys for joining us every Wednesday here at 8:30 p.m. on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Follow us on Twitter at 6 Rings Canes. Make sure you subscribe, smash the like button, and always it's all about the U. Go Canes. See you guys next week.